Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unleash Technologies webinar. I'm Michael Spinosa, and today we're going to be exploring the digital journey for associations. If you're a family, friend, or client of Unleash Technologies, you've heard us say that the web is fluid and always in motion. Consequently, associations are increasingly emphasizing agility and flexibility in the management of their websites and digital channels. Today, I have Harry Rothmann from the Association of the United States Army, and we're going to go through a series of topics that I think are going to be great for everyone. Hopefully, we have enough time to touch on everything. Those include the continuing evolution of web technology, preparing for the unknown, managing agile resources, access to diverse skill sets, the growing importance of integrations, and what lies ahead in the digital journey. Uh, Harry, how are you today?
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, we're definitely glad to have you on board here. If it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to just talk just for a second about the AUSA and a little bit about your background, and we're going to jump right into the questions. So,
You could start with talking about your beard and how we have matching beards.
well, this beard is probably the greatest beard that I've ever grown, Harry. It's got a very high combat effectiveness, and it's taken me all of 3 months. It's feathered and lethal, as they would say.
We did not plan this, by the way. The beard growth in conjunction with one another, we did not plan.
It seems like it's a theme, and I'm just going to let it continue to run. I will keep this beard as long as the working world will let me. And with that, I'm going to tell you about the Association of the United States Army. So, Harry's the Chief Technology Officer at AUSA, the Association of the United States Army, a nonprofit education and professional development association serving America's Army and supporters of a strong national defense. Unleash Technology has been proud to work with the AUSA since 2015. About Harry, as CTO, he is tasked with aligning information and technology resources with its strategic priorities and assessing the relative impact of existing and emerging technologies to AUSA operating needs. During his time at AUSA, he has led the organization's efforts to modernize business systems, including a comprehensive digital and mobile communication strategy, which I believe has led to some membership growth. Harry, have you had some membership growth at AUSA?
We certainly have, and obviously it's not entirely because of our technology infrastructure and improvements, but for a variety of reasons, we've gone from about 63,000 members just 3.5, 4 years ago, and our latest total at the beginning of this month, this year, is 209,000. So some significant growth, and I'd say, our web strategy definitely has a part or a reason for that growth.
That's wonderful. Now, I want to ask you a couple background questions, Harry, so people can understand more about you. Before, one of the things I would ask you is, it seems like you were almost destined for this role. Give us a little bit about your background growing up and who you are as a person.
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, when I was a kid, I grew up as an Army brat. My father spent 29 years in the United States Army, retired as a colonel, and that definitely had a deep impact on who I am as a person, and ultimately led me to where I'm at today in terms of working for a nonprofit, which is an Army-based, has a mission surrounding the Army and soldiers. So, that and growing up as an Army brat, as anyone who is in the military life would know, is that you grow up with a vast amount of experiences, with a lot of moving around, and you definitely have to adapt to new environments very quickly, adapt to the people around you very quickly, and ultimately, while it was tough while you're growing up, having to go to different schools and in essence change your life every couple of years. When it comes to my professional life, it obviously was great experience for adapting and molding myself into the person I am today. And then ultimately, it's really important to mention that as I was growing up, I was, always someone who really tinkered with gadgets and kind of was fascinated by the latest technologies at the time. I vividly remember sort of my first touch into getting into the internet, which was through America Online, and I think we were one of the first like 5,000 subscribers. We lived in Northern Virginia, and AOL was a Northern Virginia-based company, and we kind of were just like one of the first people to subscribe. And I was just fascinated by the internet and what that could potentially bring. And I've always really had that same passion and fascination with gadgets and new technologies ever since, and ultimately turned that into a career for myself. So that's a little bit about my background and history.
Well, I want to build a little bit on that. It also seems that, since graduating from the University of Maryland, you've spent the majority of your career in nonprofits and associations. What do you think makes them unique in their approach and relationship to technology? Kind of a loaded question there.
Yeah, I mean, so right, I have a lot of experience in the nonprofit world since I graduated the University of Maryland in 1999, and been in the nonprofit and association field for the majority of my career ever since. And it's been great because as a person who values the missions of what nonprofits do in terms of being able to give back to the world and our communities and the particular types of constituents. It's been really gratifying to work for some of the organizations that I've worked for, and it's been a pleasure. And but with that experience comes experiences with nonprofits and associations, and you get to know other people in the nonprofit world and have conversations with folks, and you learn that what you learn about the nonprofit and association world is that first of all, almost no nonprofit is the same, even though we all have a lot of similarities, like being event based and publication based and membership or some type of constituent based. Those are all the similarities, but when you really get down into the fine-tuned details of organizations, there's a lot of different approaches to how they operate, and that's pretty interesting, considering the structure and similarities at a high level are very common. But when you start having conversations with other lead IT people, which is where most of my conversations occur, it's fascinating to learn the different differences and uniqueness about each nonprofit. But to answer your question, I mean, I think what makes working for the associations and nonprofit unique and different is that, especially when it comes, I'm relating that question to my experience in technology. And when it comes to technology, I would say that associations and nonprofits tend to, I would say, be behind the times when it comes to adopting technology or adopting new methods for implementing those technologies, and it can be a bit challenging, and that's what makes working as a lead, as a IT director or CTO at a nonprofit can be challenging, because there's sometimes resistance to adopting those new technologies.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads directly into, in my opinion, is AUSA's digital journey. Would you tell us a little bit about AUSA's digital journey since you joined in 2014? How has it changed?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed dramatically, honestly. I mean, speaking towards when I first joined the organization, there was a real commitment to by our leadership to really become more modernized, and to use technology, obviously, to achieve that modernization. And there's been a real investment by our leadership, and not just in terms of our leadership and getting the buy-in that I need from the top, but also a buy-in and agreement within the staff ranks as well, to essentially push forward in a way that the organization had never done before. And for me, that strategy and that investment really starts with a website and modernizing our website. So back in 2014, we were on a very old platform, and we didn't have a mobile friendly website, and there wasn't much content happening. And so we had to really change the way the organization would operate when it came to our digital strategy. And that's where we focused in and honed in on building a strong website as the core for us to expand in later years, and to improve upon that core to reach broader audiences and engage with our users in an improved way. And there's a lot behind all of that, but ultimately it was a matter of that central focused point, which was the website at its core, and the idea that the website needs to be an engine of content, right? Because content is king, and you're not going to bring in an audience, you're not going to engage your users unless you have that content. So it wasn't just a technology improvement, but it was also a strategic improvement to understand that we had to give people a reason to come to our website and a reason to engage with us. And again, it goes back to the website being the real focal point for the beginning of that, and then how that evolved over the years.
Cool. Let me build on that a little bit. So, from your experience on that journey and how you changed that focal point to the website, what are some of the things that you've learned out of that journey? Where was there a philosophy that came out of that journey?
Yeah. So the general philosophy is that ultimately we start off with the focal point or centerpiece, which is the website, and to build on that, and ultimately um, create different digital channels and different ways for people to access your information. And those different channels could be a podcast, for example, or video content or live stream. Subsequently, we've had an approach of doing graphic novels. So just creating a variety of ways for people to access the information that we're putting out there, and to engage those audiences and across multiple platforms, and engage them in any way we possibly could. So not to limit ourselves to just one. I think too often associations get caught up in email as their primary method for marketing. And as everyone out there knows, I mean, just think about some of the online shopping you do, and then some of the other websites you sign up for. By the end of the day, you can create a new email address today, and within a month, you probably get bombarded by 100 plus emails a day. So if you're relying on email as your primary method for communicating with your membership or your constituents, that's really a dying method. The open rates on emails are dwindling. And actual click-through rates are really small percentages. There's a lot of effort put into email marketing, and I'm not saying it should be eliminated altogether. It's another way, but it just can't be the only way. And we wanted to find other ways to communicate with our members, and we did that digitally. Again, using the website as the centerpiece for that content.
No, that makes complete sense. And so you're talking a little bit now about the technology that you're seeing. What have you seen in the evolution of technology for associations in the last 10 years? How has that impacted your organizational goals?
Yeah, I actually had a couple of slides here that if we could put up on the screen real quick, it won't bore you guys to death, but there was just a couple of quick graphics that I wanted to essentially show. Yeah, first one, to me, this just represents how quickly technology is evolving in the world today. Things that I consider fairly ubiquitous right now, like the Alexa or Airbnb or Spotify or an iPad. To think that these Siri, Zoom, especially Zoom, in this day and age of COVID-19, all of these platforms that are on this screen, or technologies, Instagram, Android, have been developed in the last 10 to 12 years, which is just remarkable. I mean, if you think about the day-to-day impacts that some of these, like I said, some of these technologies are ubiquitous. Like Uber, like it's a verb, right? And that was just developed just a short time ago. So technology is evolving faster than it ever had before in the history of mankind, right? And so we can't we as associations need to adapt as well, and we need to leverage these technologies, because in essence, new technologies level the playing field for us. It allows us, as a medium-sized nonprofit organization with a fairly limited overall budget. I know there's a lot smaller nonprofits than AUSA, but there's also a lot of bigger ones. So I call us medium. That it allows us with our rather small budget to compete with organizations that have obviously much more bigger budgets because we can leverage the technology to do so. The next slide I wanted to show was essentially why we have to evolve, which is, so this graphic and the link is here, and I think we can share the link with folks because this website is actually very interesting. But what the graphic shows here is essentially the rate of adoption in U.S. households of new technology. And you'll see, like back in the late 1800s, some common technologies that were developed, such as a toilet that can flush, or a refrigerator or freezer, to the automobile. Those new technologies, as they were introduced in the early 20th century or earlier, really took a long time before they hit 80% of U.S. households. So if you really, I know it's kind of hard to see on this graph, but if you really kind of dug into it, you're looking at a 30-40 year span before these new technologies were actually adopted in a U.S. household. Then subsequently, now look at some of these technologies that have been developed here since the year 2000 and how quickly those technologies have been adopted into 80% of U.S. households. I mean, social media being one of the biggest things. The personal computer, which obviously was developed, in the 80s. But just look how quickly these technologies have quickly been adopted in U.S. households, and that just shows you, like, we can't be slow to adopt our own way of engaging users. Going back to that first slide and all the technologies that are there, we have to adopt them because 80% of U.S. households have already adopted them. We have to communicate through Alexa, or we have to work on mobile phones and be mobile friendly, and we have to adopt just as fast as the public adopts new technology. So that's really what I mean, like, in the buy-in you got to get from, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of associations and nonprofits tend to be a little bit behind the times and have difficulty selling to their leadership that they need to make investments in new technology. But for me, it's a no-brainer based on just some really basic data, which is the fact that technology is evolving faster than ever, and people are adopting it faster than ever. So we as associations need to change the traditional thinking of we don't have to figure things out as they're coming out. We have some more time. We can be behind the times. We got to get our leadership to essentially make investments in technology and continue to make those investments, because it's critical for us to maintain contact with our constituents.
That's interesting, because that really leads right to the next question, talking about leadership. How are the changes that you're seeing communicated internally to your association's leadership and your team? How do you get that buy-in? Because you're talking about how that's a necessity there. I'd love to hear about how you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, obviously, all organizations are different, and the people who make up those organizations are different, and those leaders can be people who want to adopt technology quickly, and it can be leaders who don't. So this, obviously, it's impossible to give you an answer that would help everyone. But I would just say obviously the information I just gave in terms of how quickly technology is evolving and how quickly the world is adopting those technologies is a pretty great selling point when you're going to your leadership and they're asking, why are we losing members, and why are we not getting our events, why are the events not growing, and why are our numbers are dwindling, which unfortunately for many associations out there, it's happening. And it's the answer I would give you is well, because you probably aren't adopting these technologies and reaching these audiences in the ways that they're connecting now. And you need to show that, look, unfortunately, the association term is something that some people see as, a bit of an archaic philosophy or structure with membership, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can be modernized, we can be modern, and we can relate to the youth of today and tomorrow. But we have to go to our leadership and sell them on this. And frankly, I mean, I came to this organization because I saw the willingness to do that. And sometimes, obviously, that's not as clean as the situation I've been in. But when you find yourself at an organization that's unwilling to change, you really just got to continue to push on the need for evolving technology at your association. And if numbers aren't showing that you've got an engaged audience, it's likely because you're not engaging in investing in technology.
I would agree. Do you in some of the bigger purchases, do you put together an ROI metric of any type? Do you try to show that return to your
We
leadership?
certainly try to show what that return on investment could be, but it's difficult sometimes. I mean, when you're looking to improve your website numbers and maybe not have a paywall for something, so you're not actually converting members directly, but you're gaining an audience, or on a social media channel you're gaining an audience, and sometimes that doesn't directly relate to your membership. It's difficult to prove, but my overall thought process is, if you as an organization represent yourself well in terms of using modern technologies, that ultimately that will have a return on investment in that your reputation will be considered that you're not one of these kind of archaic institutions, that you are a forward-thinking organization. And by leveraging new technologies and promoting your use of that misinterpretation that associations are something that is archaic will go out the window, and people will be more open to engaging with you. And if you're on those social channels, as you should be, engaging your audiences there, and not looking for not looking for them to join immediately, but just to be getting engagements, that does count for something. You're getting your word out. It may not turn it immediately into a dollar, but ultimately engaging people and interacting with them is a return on that investment. It may not be that financial return, but which ultimately you do need to get, obviously, but it does have to start somewhere, and those engagements is really where it can start.
Follow-up question. So the current state of digital requires organizations to be more agile. I couldn't agree more with that statement. However, that can be a real challenge. And as a group that works with associations day in and day out, we can see that challenge. How have you been able to integrate more agility into the AUSA?
Yeah, so I mean, that word agility can mean different things to different people, but for me, what it really means is a willingness to constantly adapt or to iterate what you're doing and whatever your strategy is. So really, as it relates to AUSA and how we've been working with Unleashed Technologies is a prime example. So, I'd say 15 years ago, if you built a website, you invested, I don't know, X amount of dollars on a website, and you work very hard, and you it was probably the old waterfall method. You built out your requirements, and those requirements were built by your vendor, and then you launched your website, and then you were like, poof, we're done. The website's built.
All right.
That's great. Let's move on to something else, right? I mean, that was kind of the approach 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
That is obviously not possible these in this day and age in 2020.
Right.
If you think about the apps on your phones and how they get updated frequently, that's about as agile as you can be, right? Any of your applications that are on your phone, the operating system on your phone is constantly updating. Well, your website should be no different. Your website needs to be constantly updated. It needs to be constantly improved. You need to continue to make it better. And so for me, that's how we are being agile. We are being agile because we've partnered with Unleashed Technologies. We've invested in a growth package where we have the ability to have skilled developers work as on our team, without having to hire people directly. I think that's a crucial point that I'd like to make, is that, I've gone through the stages of my career where I tried to bring in a full-time developer on staff and develop things in-house. And while there's could be advantages to that, ultimately it just wasn't a method that could work in the long term. With the DC area having such in demand, that particular skill set of a web developer, especially if it's a Drupal developer, for example, that skill set is really difficult or really high in demand. And to be able to hold on to someone like that in the association world, where sometimes your salary levels aren't on par with for-profit organizations. Working with Unleashed Technologies, I don't have to worry about that. I use Unleashed as my partner, and that's where I get those skills, that subject matter expertise that I need, and that's what we've continued to do. So we've been agile because we've partnered with a company like Unleashed, and we've taken that partnership and used their skill sets to better improve our website since the day we launched. We've always been improving. And I'd actually like to highlight some of the things that we've done overall to make the website better. And when I talk about this central approach to using a website as a core, obviously we went to a mobile-friendly website where it could be accessed, on any device and be user-friendly. But as I mentioned before, we expanded our reach in terms of how we communicate with our constituents. And social channels are obvious, but how are you going to post content to a social channel if it, you can certainly post other people's content, and we do sometimes, but posting your own content, where is that going to drive your users back to your website? And we've been getting into the podcasting world. We've been developing graphic novels, and all of those are digital. We've converted some publications that essentially used to be print-only publications. We made them digital, and our audience gets those digitally through our web. All of our events we've live streamed and use our website as the place to go for those live streams. And then one of the other biggest things we've done and we've evolved over time is that we've taken, so AUSA is made up of 120 plus chapters across the world, mainly near Army installations. And we've said to our chapters, look, we would like to be your chapter website. And so we've got over 40 chapters that use our website as their homepage, meaning they've got a landing page on our site for their particular chapter. And what does that do? That helps us build content. Those chapters publish events, those chapters publish information, and a lot of that information is localized. It's for the individuals in those communities, but ultimately they're all coming back to one place, which is ausa.org, as a place for that content. So again, it goes back to this strategy of a central point for all that content to start, and the different channels are. We continue to explore different channels, from audio, video to whatever else, and we're using those channels and using the centerpiece of our strategy to push out those channels.
I love it. And agility is something near and dear to Unleashed Technology's heart, our hearts. Our entire model's built on it, and even agility is something you don't get. It's something you're always working towards. It's something you're always trying to cultivate and make better. At least that's how we think about it here. You mentioned in the last comment about virtual events, and we couldn't have a discussion without bringing some kind. Associations have been hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic, for the simple purpose, none other that a lot of these groups are very events driven, and you do local, regional, you have a huge national level conference, an annual conference. Can you talk to me a little bit? You've shifted your events into a virtual environment. How has that process gone? What are the challenges, and what is the response from membership?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we're in the midst of a lot of change. Traditionally, AUSA is a very as you said, a very event-driven organization. From our largest event, our annual meeting, which is about 30,000 plus attendees. We fill up the Washington D.C. Convention Center with all kinds of cool exhibits. It's really kind of an incredible event, from tanks and helicopters to drones and everything else that if you would think about what the Army does, it really kind of impacts a lot of different types of businesses, down to events that we do and host internally at our conference center in Arlington, where our headquarters is. So we have events ranging from 50 people to 30,000 people and everything in between. And obviously, with the latest with COVID-19, we've had to adopt. We've had to cancel a variety of events. We had this one trade show that we do overseas that got canceled, and we've canceled one of our larger events that we do in Huntsville, Alabama. There's been a major impact on AUSA's business, and ultimately, I think COVID-19 and everything that's happened over the last couple of months is something that's going to impact the world and change the world permanently. I don't think this is just a temporary change. So we've had to try to adapt, and we're starting to get we're starting to figure it out, as many other associations are doing as well. Some faster than us, some slower, but we're working towards adapting to that new environment, which is virtual events. And even if we go back to in-person events, how does a virtual event complement the in-person event? And we haven't figured it out yet, honestly. It's a work in progress. We've been working on some different platforms and have some new ideas. We have not yet canceled our annual meeting, which is in October every year. And our hope and our goal is to essentially still have that, but we will adapt if we have to in regards to that meeting. And we're adapting in terms of some of our smaller events and hosting some virtual webinars like this that relate to our constituents. It's difficult, and ultimately, to answer your question, the world has changed, and I personally feel that this whole COVID-19 experience is something that has changed the world, similar to the way 9/11 changed the world. Obviously, two different types of events, but in the way they impact the world, I think they're both going to have, obviously 9/11 had a significant change on how the world operated in a lot of different arenas. And I think when it comes to whether it's a for-profit business or a nonprofit or association, the way people do business will change. I feel like people are much more in tune with having these types of webinars and communicating through video, and that's been a forced change. But I think ultimately that forced change will lead to down the road when we're allowed back in our offices and the world gets back to where it was. Hopefully, that people will definitely be more open to virtual events and virtual communication.
What's interesting is the question before when we were discussing about agility. To me, this is an exceptional example of agility, even outside of the tech. Obviously, this is related to technology, but AUSA and other associations trying to make this move and do it quickly is a great example of agility, where something is acted upon the greater world that is outside of everybody's control. If you had brought this up in January and said, we should shift all of our stuff virtual, I think most associations would have been like, you're crazy. Nobody will ever get into this. And now we see this fundamental phase shift from people of how they're looking at events overall. And even some people are like, I can still do this, have greater margins to fill mission for the organization and give people exactly what they want. I think it's opened their eyes to a whole new world.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you're right. I think they're, prior to this whole event and quarantine and everything that's occurred, well, I mean, we've had discussions about virtual events and the difficulty of prior to this and getting people to transition to that type of environment. I mean, I've obviously as someone who uses technology so much have been in tune with attending some virtual events, speaking at some virtual events. But yeah, I mean, the conversation is now very different, and it's because of what's happened, and ultimately now it's something that people feel like they have to do, not just because this because this is a temporary scenario, hopefully, right, where people are all stuck at home and now starting to get back to work. But permanently, I think it's something that the world's eyes have been open towards, and I especially feel like associations have had to do that as well, because so many associations are, their revenue is dependent upon events, and if you lose that aspect of generating revenue through exhibits and registration, attendee sales, you got to find an alternate way, and hopefully organizations are able to find that solution into the future. And I still think there's a lot to figure out for many of us.
No, I completely agree. Um, I want to add on that, and I want to think about how I want to word this. Whether it's a virtual conference or an increase in online educations, they believe this will have a long-lasting effect on associations and its members. I think we both agree that there's a long-term impact. The question is, what do you think that long-term impact looks like? What do you think is going to happen there between members, between education, virtual events, all kinds of things? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as I've alluded to, I think more people will be willing to participate virtually, whether I'm an attendee or an exhibitor or a speaker. I think the world's eyes have been open to the technologies have been there for years, right? And it's just going back to the adoption, I guess. In some ways, the adoption of these particular technologies hasn't happened as rapidly as some of the other ones have. But now that adoption rate has dramatically gone up. Like, I mean, if you think of Zoom, right? I mean, they were a popular company before the whole thing started, but now, in its own way, it's ubiquitous as well. So with Zoom being so popular and being used by so many, that will certainly impact the general public's ability to participate in whatever it may be virtually, because people are now familiar with how to enable their audio and their webcam, and some people didn't even realize that their laptop even had a webcam and audio, and a mic on it. So I feel like this definitely will have a long-term impact, and ultimately has sped up the adoption rate for virtual events and virtual technologies.
So it's so interesting you mentioned that. You said something earlier about Uber becoming a verb. And the first instance I can remember of that in technologies is I'm going to make a Xerox copy. I'm going to
Right,
Xerox this, right?
right,
And now we're seeing that happen so fast, just in this short period of time. I'm gonna Uber over there.
right.
Me and my
Google,
friend are gonna Zoom later, right?
right.
And so you're seeing these organizations, and I think that that's a wave that associations can really jump on and capitalize on. And I think it's very,
Yeah, I
very.
mean, yeah, it's a great point. I mean, and it really, your point piggybacks exactly on that previous slide about the adoption the rate of adoption, right? Xerox in the 80s, we probably could think of another example or two, but it might be hard. Whereas you just in a quick second named a few, that are have turned into verbs. The other one is snapping, like the Snapchat, right? I mean, I'm not terribly familiar with that, but I've got some young kids, so I understand some of those technologies that are even beyond me. But there's so many of these technologies. I mean, the TikTok has exploded, for example, and I wonder how many association professionals in their 40s and 50s or whatever, whatever age really, so a full-time association professional have ever jumped on TikTok. And should a association jump on TikTok? Maybe, probably not. Maybe, I don't know, but like, that's a way if you want to engage with an audience. I mean, who knows what the demographics of TikTok are? I think they're pretty young, but if you want to engage with a new audience, there's literally millions of people using TikTok right now, and it probably isn't the right fit for a lot of associations, but if you can make it fit, you should go do it, right? Because that's
Yes.
a new audience. You want to prove that you're you're an association that's forward thinking, and that's just one example. So that's the type of attitude that I think people need to have, just in terms of a willingness to explore whatever these new technologies are, and whatever the latest fad is going to be, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, is a willingness to kind of explore them as they're popularized. And some will die out, of course,
Right.
but others won't. And you've got, if you're an early adopter as an association, then that's probably going to do you well. And it's okay to, I think the other point there is, it's okay to kind of fail too. Like, I mean, don't be afraid to fail. If you explore, TikTok, and it doesn't work for you and your organization, or Snapchat, or whatever else. If it doesn't work for your organization, that's fine. It doesn't hurt to try. I
I
don't think.
completely agree with that assessment. And that comes back to, if we're talking about exploring the digital journey, exploring is the key word in that title, right? Is
Yeah.
exploring. Like, if you go in there and it doesn't work out, what did you lose? Especially in the modern platforms where the barrier to entry is just so low. You
Right.
know, to just do a little. I think oftentimes one of the things that I see in associations, sharing with you, Harry, and I think this is a pet peeve of both of us, is sometimes there's a tendency to overplan, to get some testing, some prototyping done, to see how things can positively or negatively impact. Well, it has to be a perfect rollout. It has to be huge. What about this? What if this happens? What if this happens? Certain things you can take and just say, let's just do this and see what happens.
And
Let's
that's where it comes back to being agile, right? I mean, that's the whole fundamental aspect of agile, is that you can't plan everything in advance. You're gonna have to adapt, and you iterate. And that iteration for me is just another word for being agile, and that is, you can't predefine everything. You just start building it with a sense of what you need, and then you'll figure it out along the way, and you just need to adapt quickly. And that's the whole, for me, again, everyone kind of has their own definitions and aspects of this. I know there's formal methodologies with agile methodologies and everything, but for me, it just comes back to constantly evolving, being iterative, not planning so much that you spend so much time planning, and then that just doesn't work. Even when even if you plan to the T, and plan for 6 months straight, and have every document, you think you have everything, it's impossible to get everything. And that's
I
why iteration and being agile is so critical, is that you can build it as you go, and evolve it as you go, get to your minimal viable product, and then launch it, and then continue to make it better and continue to iterate. And it goes back to my point before about having the ability to not just say, oh, I'm done. You got to continue to make it better. Just like every app that's on your phone is continuing to make improvements, they're fixing bugs, or adding features. That's the way of the world today. And we need to continue to do that with our technologies that we're using.
I completely agree. The iteration is so important. I can't tell you how many times in what I call the monolithic builds, that it creates frustration when things are missed, but it's the nature of human beings. It's the nature of learning how things are going to interact. So there has to be a balance there, where we're moving forward, we're creating those MVPs, where there's enough knowledge to make something that fits our hypothesis, but at the same time can be able to be adjusted along its path.
There's a reason why agile methodology was created, and that's because, in my opinion, the traditional waterfall method, there was never a project that launched on time and with complete 100% success, right? I mean, just never. So I would challenge anyone watching this to give me an example of something that, a software or technology project that launched to perfection in the traditional waterfall method. Like, there's just no way. I just don't feel like it ever happened. I mean, that's just an opinion, I guess, but like, and that's why agile methodology was created, is that you're not going to get it right the first time. So continue to just evolve it and make it better. And that should suffice.
I completely agree. So next steps, AUSA, where are the next steps on AUSA's digital journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're going to continue to try to engage our audiences in different ways, and continue to evolve ourselves. I personally believe that So one of the most obvious projects we're working on is just upgrading our back end technology. So we're working with you guys to go from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. Now, of course, Drupal 9 is coming out. So I try not to think about that, but I know that's still a few years away in terms of being something that we'll have to worry about. But um, we're also just looking at, personalization, I think is a big next step and overall of technology. I think, you know, an anonymous web user almost doesn't exist anymore, right? So if you think about the use of Facebook and Gmail, just using two examples, talk about something that's ubiquitous. What percentage of the public has a Facebook account or a Gmail account, right? A lot. I don't know what the number is, but anecdotally speaking, it's a large number, right? So if you have an account with Gmail or Facebook, then guess what? On the web, we know a little bit about you, and when you come to our website, I know a little bit about you. So anonymous web visitors are really few and far between. So how do we take that information and leverage it to create a better experience for that user, because they're already logged into Facebook, and we know in this case, for my case, that they're in the U.S. Army. So or they once served in the U.S. Army, whether they be a veteran or a retiree. So how do we leverage that information and tailor their experience based on that information? That's where the next step is. And then the other piece of it is we've been adopting our association management software and going to a Salesforce model, using an AMS that's Salesforce based, Fontiva. With that come integration. So um, the ability to take different software packages and easily have them communicate with one another is incredible these days. I mean, in the year 2020, what you can do to allow different software packages to talk to one another, there's a lot of capability there. And us, AUSA, this is kind of, a major step for us, and we're probably behind some other associations in getting into the Salesforce environment. But it's really a game changer in terms of being able to develop different functionality and to service and communicate with our membership in a way that we've never been able to do before. So I've just hit on a few things, but ultimately, to summarize, we're keeping up with the latest and greatest software packages that we can on our website, because our website continues to be our focal point, our centerpiece. We are looking at adopting personalization or to find ways to communicate directly to our membership, or even someone who's not a member, and to know a little bit about them and tailor their web experience when they come to us, to reach out to them through social channels, because so many people are hitting social channels like Instagram and Facebook and communicating with them there. So really tailoring those experiences. And then the third thing is just integrating with having our technology platforms integrate with one another, so that we don't have siloed systems anymore, so that we can better communicate with our member or our potential member. So it's really just continue to evolve ourselves, to be agile in the way we approach technology, when to leverage the latest and greatest technologies that are out there. And I've named some things that have actually been out there for many years, and ultimately they're at a place now that we're able to adapt for ourselves. And I would just encourage anyone who's watching this who may feel like they're potentially behind, that technology is getting easier, and even as it evolves, it's getting easier to use, and it's getting easier to implement. So that's the good news. But I would encourage anyone who feels like they're behind, that it's 2020. Now's the time to get the buy-in that you need to adopt new technologies, because they're evolving, as we already talked about. They're evolving very quickly, and we need to evolve our organizations just as much.
No, I completely agree with you. From you know how I feel about that digital experience aspect of things. I feel like the next big step in the digital realm is creating customized experiences per people that leverage anonymous and non-anonymous data to create a very succinct, you could call it individual, maybe even segmental experience. We're doing a lot of that now. There's a couple key tools out there. Optimize 360 from Google. There is Acquia Lift on the Drupal side that's been very, very powerful. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth there, and that is a little bit more like the Wild West, which is also exciting. It's a new field, especially for associations who we're seeing to start to adopt this slower. The barrier to entry on these technologies can be harder, but even with Google 360 Optimize, there's a free version there that you can leverage. While it is in its infancy and probably won't take you where you need to go, it'll show you what's possible, and then you can move into bigger and badder things. I had a couple thoughts of my own, which I can't
Can I just
remember.
add something in to your point? I mean, you mentioned,
Oh yeah, yeah,
how Aquia, for example, can be expensive, and
yeah.
that's just one example. And really, what I want to say is, um, nonprofits really can't, technology at nonprofits really should not be an afterthought. Okay, so if you're working for an organization where technology is an afterthought, then, and if you're in a position like myself where you're director of IT or an IT manager or someone who's in a senior leadership position who understands the technology, um, we can't allow technology to be an afterthought anymore. It's 2020. We need to invest in technology just like we would invest in anything else, because all too often I've seen organizations reluctant to invest in technology, but that really shouldn't be that way. We have to evolve, and a really big part of that evolution is the willingness to invest in technology, for our associations, because if you see the power of technology and what it can do, but then you say, oh, we just can't afford that, you can't make that mistake. You got to find ways to make it happen. I know it comes in with getting a lot of buy-in from, both your senior leadership and your junior leadership, but if you're working for an organization that doesn't think that way, you have to try to make them think that way, and do your best to get them engaged and using technology. And I think, more and more I've seen that organizations are willing to make that change. So I'm not implying that a lot of nonprofits aren't, but I know there's still, through personal experiences and working with and communicating with other, CTOs and IT directors, that there are some organizations out there that are reluctant to make those investments. And um, you know, we need to stop thinking that way, that technology is expensive, and we can't adopt it because of those expenses. It really should be a part of you doing your business, and it should be on the really the you know for first thoughts of any major project, because technology impacts every aspect of every organization, whether you think that or not. It really does, and it should, at least it should. So that's my little rant.
Oh, it's awesome, and I think we're running very short on time. In fact, I think we only have time for one question. I'm hoping I'm getting my timing right. But first of all, thank you so much, Harry. I'm going to give you this question. This comes from Alicia. Alicia, and she said, "Are there any tips for associations in the early stage of their digital journey? If you are part of the technical team, how do you engage marketing and other departments?"
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a loaded question, just in the sense of, like, every organization has its own dynamics, and can be very different. And I recognize that, having stepped into multiple organizations, and seeing very different dynamics amongst them, also doing some consulting work and volunteer work. I think I recognize that there's no blanket statement for that particular question, but I will say there's definitely some general concepts that you can think about, in terms of beginning your digital journey. If you're really on the beginning steps, you find yourself, you feel like you're way behind the times, and you need to start somewhere. the first thing is to get the buy-in of everyone. I mean, you have to, everyone needs to at least recognize that the change needs to occur. They don't necessarily have to recognize the value of the change. They don't necessarily have to recognize how you implement those changes, but the fact everyone needs to recognize that the change is necessary, because if you don't have a planned digital strategy and a potential journey for that digital strategy, you need to start. And it starts with both buy-in from leadership, so you can obviously get the money and resources to do it, but it also starts with every department who it impacts, and more likely it impacts everyone across your organization. So it's not just potentially marketing, right? Obviously, it could potentially start with marketing. I know websites live in different, departments in different organizations. Some it's the IT department, some it's the marketing department, some it's the communications department, some it's the events department. It doesn't really matter. You just need to get everyone on board, and everyone needs to see why this needs to be done and why the strategy needs to be created, and work together with them. Get everyone's input, and find ways to involve everyone through the process, and you'll get that buy-in, hopefully. And if not, maybe you should find another place to work. No, just kidding.
Well, that's fair enough. Well, I wish we had time for more questions. We were able to take this one because it was a pre-submission. In the future, on future webinars, we're going to try to make more time for this. So please keep those questions coming. And if you ever want to pre-submit a question, please feel free to do that. A couple closing remarks. First, besides Harry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And just real quick, I would just say, I'm happy there's my email address. I'm happy to, I always enjoy talking with colleagues. So I'm sorry, not colleagues, but other nonprofit professionals, whatever your experiences are, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation, and talk it through if you have any specific questions.
Absolutely. This webinar will be made available. We'll be sending out to everybody that registered next week. For those that maybe missed it or want to share it with other colleagues, along with contact information for both myself and Harry, and of course, Unleash Technologies. So thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
And Harry, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. It was really worth it.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you everybody.